Hey everyone, Steph here. I'm thrilled to bring you the highly anticipated part 3 of our real-world employee recognition app. Today we're going to be diving headfirst into Power Automate. In this exciting episode, we'll show you how to dynamically select images from a SharePoint library and seamlessly embed them in visually stunning, mobile-friendly emails using HTML. Plus, as an added bonus, we'll be sure to address a critical aspect: error handling in the case that an employee is missing their manager in Active Directory. No detail left behind here. If you find this video valuable and want to stay updated on the latest content with Power Apps, Power Automate, and pretty much anything in the Power platform, please consider subscribing to my channel. So grab your virtual tool belt and get ready to unleash the full potential of your Power App with the incredible magic of Power Automate. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and let's embark on this exciting journey together. The marketing department wanted different graphics as well as different colors used in the emails that are sent to the recipient, depending on which prop was selected. Since we have 5 props currently, as well as the option to select multiples, that necessitated 6 graphics. Now, since people change their mind and graphics should be updated to keep things fresh, we decided to leverage a SharePoint library for these graphics. Now, the bonus of that is that the marketing department can come in here and update these whenever they like. The downside is that if the recipient gets an email and looks at it on their mobile phone, and their mobile phone isn't logged into SharePoint, they wouldn't be able to see the graphics. So what we did in the emails and in the flow that I'll show you in a minute is we embed the graphics within the email. It takes a little bit of variable utilization, but I'll show you step by step how we did it. Let's get started in Power Automate. Here we are in Power Automate. I like to start with the finished product first, so let's review what we're going to be creating together. Now that Superfloof has joined us, we have proper adult supervision. This flow is triggered off when an item is created. We're getting file content, again, to ensure that we have the mobile-friendly requirements. Here we have a bunch of variables. Again, I'll get into all of this in a minute. Now, because the end user could select multiple props, we have to handle that text. So we're taking and appending to string the variables, and then we are using a compose statement to get rid of the comma at the end. Then, depending on which item is selected, we are again getting the graphic. We are appropriately changing it, leveraging base64 to embed the image in the email. Then as we scroll down, for each one of the people that are selected, remember you could select multiple people, we are sending an acknowledgement email to the person that submitted it. That's where we'll start with this flow. We're getting the manager for the person that was submitted. And if they don't have a manager in Active Directory, which we all know should be the case, but sometimes isn't, we're handling it properly. If we didn't have this step in here, and we had a get manager step, and no manager was present, the entire flow would fail. I'll show you how we handle that as well. And then here we're sending another email, which is this one here. Let's get into the details and build it together. Here I am at make.powerautomate.com. Here's a little insider trick. If you type in flow.microsoft.com, it will redirect you here. From the top menu, I'm going to click a new flow and create an automated flow. Here you could name your flow, which is always a good process to start with. This is going to be props working. For now, we can always change the name. And we're going to select when an item is created. We only want this flow to trigger once and hit create. When an item is created, where? We have it in our Sky Ranch site, and the list name is props. Now, what do we want to do when one of these is submitted? The first thing that we want to do is send an email. And this is going to be the acknowledgement email to the person that submitted it. I'm going to select send an email v2. Now we want this email to go to the person that created it. We could hard code, but we're going to select add dynamic content. And you see here, it automatically gives us only email addresses. So we're going to select created by email. And what's the subject going to be? It's going to be props received. Again, you can have whatever you want in here. Now, Microsoft has given us in the send v2 email a very nice GUI interface, which we're going to leverage for this one. We're going to use HTML here in a minute, but for now we're just going to keep it simple. And hello. And I always like to start with a greeting. And who are we sending this email to? It's the created by. So I can filter the list, created by display name. I'm going to hit a comma. Thank you for taking the time to submit a props to recognize. Now, who are they recognizing? From our SharePoint list, it was who do you wish to recognize? Now, as we do that, look what happens. It automatically puts it in an apply to each loop because it knows that from the SharePoint list, you could have multiple selections here. Saves us a bit of work. Now, because there could be 4 John Smiths in your organization, I always like to put an email address in here. So I'm going to add a parentheses and then another who do you wish to recognize, and I'm going to put their email address. That just makes sure that we're talking about the same John Smith. And what are we recognizing them for? This is where we start building out our variables, right? We want to recognize them for, and if we look at an example of this email, that's going to be what was selected from the SharePoint list, which prop. Now, before you can use a variable, you have to initialize a variable. Those are always initialized at the top of your flow. So we're going to add an action and create a variable. We're going to select initialize a variable. Now, before you do anything else with this variable, you want to rename it. So I'm going to select rename. My best practice is to keep the name of the action in the title bar and then add what you're doing to it. So initialize variable var props name. I'm going to copy that and paste. This is going to be a string. Now that we have the variable, what are we going to do with it in the email, right? So we're going to take all of the props that could have been selected and string them together. So we are going to append to string, append to string variable. Now again, before you do anything else, add a name in there. Again, pasting in what we have. And we only have one option here. And what are we doing? We are getting the props value demonstrated, or props value demonstrated, and the value, because that is a multiple choice. Now, because it's multiple choice, it automatically stuck us in an apply to each loop, which is fabulous. I'm going to rename it, apply to each, var props name. Now, if we were to leave it like this, it would just put the name and the name and the name. We're going to add a comma and a space so that we have that breakup in it. Now, there's one additional step we have to go through here. We have to take that last comma space off at the end. Let's use a compose statement. Add an action. It's just a data operation. And within here, we're going to enter an expression. And this is what we're going to enter. So what we do here is we take all of the variables, we combine them together once the for all loop is complete, and then we take the last 2 characters off, and that last 2 character consists of a comma and a space. So copy this in. I'll put the code in the comments, by the way, and paste it into the expression and hit OK. Now we can save, because you want to make sure you save. There is no version history in Power Automate. Now let's add that compose statement to the email. Output of the compose statement, and there we go. Let's save again, and let's test. And because this is a brand new flow and we haven't tested it yet, we'll click manual, click test, go back to the app, and we're going to select a colleague. I'm going to enter Rose. I'm going to give it 3, well, let's give it all 5 options. See how it handles it. And testing compose. Hit submit. Now if we go back to our flow, we're able to see that the flow ran successfully, and expanding out every one of these, we can see what happened, as well as in my email, we have new perspective, comma space, innovative, comma space, extra mile, comma space, problem solver, comma space, team player. Excellent. We're getting there. We're getting close to this, which is what we want to do next, embed the image. Now, if your employees are never going to open an email on their cell phone, all we would have to do at this point is change the email to code view and enter in HTML for an image. And I have that text right here. That way, if they were only ever going to be on their PCs, they would be able to get this image, as long as all the users have access to that document library, of course. However, nowadays, the only constant is the speed of change. So we're going to have to do something different here. What we're going to have to do is get the file content. And because we're getting the file content, we can keep this email in a GUI interface. So back to the top, first thing we need to do, actually I'm going to do it after the variable, is add an action, get file content. There we go. And which file am I getting? I'm getting the props image. Again, you don't have to put comments in there or rename it. Your coworkers will thank you. And then from here, we're going to select a file location, and it's within props images and all props. Now marketing can come in here and update this file whenever they like. This reference will always stay the same as long as they don't rename it. You have to train them not to rename things. Now let's create the variable that will take the image and convert it into a base 64 and allow us to embed it in the email. So underneath the image content that we just got, we're going to add an action, and we're going to add another variable. We're going to initialize the variable. We're going to rename it var main props. I'm going to copy that, paste it in here. It's going to be a string. And now this is where it gets fun. In the expression, don't worry, all the code will be in the comments. The expression that we're going to add here is this. Now you notice I pasted, but nothing shows up here. That's because it took in an extra hard return. You can kind of see a fuzzy line. So I take it back, and there we have dot content. We move our mouse to the beginning before the period there, click on Enter Dynamic Content, and then we're going to click on File Contents. Now what we've done here is get all of the file contents and converted it. We're going to click OK, and now we have a variable in here. We have the output of what we need. Now there's more that we have to do here. If we were to just take this variable and plop it in the email, it wouldn't know how to handle it. So we have to add a bit of code. We're going to add this at the front. And at the end, again, leveraging best practices to have an alt in there for screen readers and the width of the graphic. So now we've gotten the file content, we've turned it into an output, and we've embedded it in the HTML for an image file. So now we can go back to our email, come down here, we're going to give a couple hard returns, and then we're going to give it the var main props. Now something else that I tend to do as a best practice, you guys follow the best practice for your organization, but I always like to put a little string of text at the bottom, letting people know that this is an automated email, please don't respond to it. Now 99% of the people are going to ignore that anyway, but it covers you, so in case someone comes and complains, well, you have something to say about it. So we're going to make it bold, 9, and tiny. Now you see, I had a mail ref, right? I had an email address in here. I can leverage the GUI and add a link to it. I'm going to copy that, add a link target, mail to Sky Ranch, and that'll make that a clickable link. Now let's save, click test. And because we already submitted one of these, we can leverage that same one again. We don't have to submit another props. Hit test, then go back to our email. You notice I've got a few in here because I have a few of these flows. And here we have it. We have the text of the email with all of the props with no end trailing space. We have the graphic, and we have the text at the bottom. Great success. Thankfully, marketing provided the email layout, so all we have to do is recreate it. This part is Microsoft. If you have the word congrats in an email, you get confetti. As we scroll down, we notice all 5 props were selected. So we have a blue graphic and blue surround. We'll get into that in a minute. And then we just have to recreate this. As you see at the bottom of the email, a copy of this recognition has been sent to your manager and the manager name, and it may be featured on the communications channel. That's the manager portion we were talking about before. So our next steps are going to be recreating this email and inserting the manager in the CC line. If they don't have a manager, we want to also adjust this last line of text to reflect that. Here we are back in Power Automate. Since we already have the apply to each loop, we can use that for the manager portion. We're going to add an action. Get manager. And we're getting the manager for who we want to recognize and their email. If you select anything else, it will give you an error. Now what we want to do is add a condition. You do not need to do this step if you are sure that every employee has a manager, but this client did not. Manager is blank if manager is blank. So what we're going to do here is if in the get manager process, if the ID is equal to null, and we can grab null from expression here and hit OK, then what do we do? So if there is no manager, we want to send an email notifying somebody first off. And we would want to send this to whoever they specified. In this case, I'm just going to use myself and fill out the email appropriately. So there we have the email. It's going to me with a subject line that matters. Again, who are we recognizing as blank, and the email in case there are 3 or 4 John Smiths in your organization. Now, if we look at the email that gets sent, we have a little bit of text here. So we need to create a variable and add the appropriate text. So back to the top, this is some more of that Microsoft calisthenics I was telling you about. You have to go down and up and down and up. We're going to add another variable and we're going to initialize it. Initialize variable, rename it, var manager, paste, and it's going to be a string. Now back down to the bottom. I have a typo in there, but that's okay. Now we're going to set a variable. We only want this to be set once. If we were to append with all the for each loops, you would get various things in here. So we're going to set the variable. And which variable are we going to set? We're going to rename it. Select the variable. And in here, paste in the text. So it's going to be an HTML email, so I already have the formatting in there. I is just an indent, not indent. I is italics. And then we have the display name of the manager. I made a mistake. This should go in the if no loop. So what I can do is a little bit of trickery. I can copy to my clipboard. I can go over here to add an action. And from my clipboard, I can paste. There we have it. The var manager is set if there is one. If there isn't one, the footer of the email says nothing about the manager. However, if this flow were to run right now and fail, the entire flow would quit working. It would run as a failed flow. So what we have to do is tell it that even if the flow fails, keep going. So we need to set the configure run after on this action to is successful or has failed. Either way, we want something to happen at this step. Either the manager is notified, the footer is set to manager is notified, or the footer is set to manager has not been notified, and an email is fired off to IT. Either way, we have a win. Back to the marketing provided email. The very first thing on the email is the graphic that changes depending on what prop is selected. So let's start by setting up those conditions. Back to Power Automate. Here in Power Automate, I've already started the body of the email that's going to be sent. For testing purposes only, I highly recommend that you set the to in all emails to whoever created the prop or created the item. That makes it so much easier for you to test in the future. Now, because the email graphic is going to change, how do we determine what is the prop that's selected? Well, we already leveraged this compose statement up here. If this compose statement is one item, it's going to be one item. If it's more than one item, it's the other graphic. So if we go back to the Power App, and we're going to go to the data and select edit data from here, that'll take us back to the SharePoint list. Now, why I highly recommend that you go to the SharePoint list is that this props value demonstrated column is a choice column. And if you don't spell what you're entering into Flow exactly, it's not same. I spent hours troubleshooting once, and it was just a fat finger that I had done on one of the choice column items. So go to the choice column item and use your copy and paste. So now we're going to go back to the flow, and right below the compose statement, but before the apply to each, we're going to add an action. And we're going to add a condition. And the condition is going to be if the output is equal to the prop that I just copied from the choice list. Now you notice there's a bit of a hard return. Make sure you take that out. Now for the next one, back to the column, back to the flow. What we're going to do here is a parallel branch. It will go through one, and if it doesn't work, it'll go to the next and the next. We're going to go to control again, condition. Here, if the output is equal to innovative, then we go from there. Let me show you a trick. From here, we can then copy this to the clipboard, and instead of having to go to parallel action again and choose condition and control, you can then copy and paste everything in and just get them all hammered out. I'm not going to do that just for time, but you'll notice we have one issue here. The apply to each loop that we set up for the emails is below one of the conditions. We want it to be below all of the conditions. So what I'm going to do is a little bit of a cheat. I'm going to come down here to new step, and you see how when I did that, it gave me the arrows. I'm going to hit just anything here. I'm going to send an email. Now I can grab this bar and drag it down here, and it'll remove it from being below just one condition and have it be at the bottom. And then I can delete this and we're good to go. Except, how do you know which condition is which? So we need to come back in, best practice, and rename these two. Condition, new perspective. I'm going to copy this, rename, condition, innovative. So now we're starting to get there. Now, what do we need to do first? If it is equal to new perspective, then we're going to get file content, just like we did before. So get file content. And now if you have marketing trained, they'll never change the file name, right? But leveraging version history, they'll just be able to overwrite it. We're going to select the prop images and select the new perspective graphic. Now we want to do the same thing that we did before, but we need a variable for it. So back to the top, let's initialize a variable. Now, because we're leveraging conditions, we only have to leverage this variable once. I'm a lazy IT. I don't want to do one for each value. So initialize a variable, rename it, var props image file location. Copy that, stick it into here, and make it a string. Back down to our condition. We're going to set a variable. Now you want to set the variable, not append, so you don't run the risk of overwriting or having additional things added to it if you do an append. We're going to set the variable. Here, first thing before you do anything else, make sure you rename this. Then we're going to select the file location variable. And here we're going to do the same thing we did before down below. I'm going to enter .star content, move to the front. And then from here, click on dynamic content, scroll down, and leverage get file content. Now, this is where you'll get into trouble. I did not rename that variable first. Now, if I were to rename it now, this may or may not get updated. I'm going to leave it for this case, but this is why you want to make sure that you rename your containers before you use them. So now that we have that in there, we need to do the same code that we did before, the image HTML, with the proper best practice of having an alt tag in there. Grab the new perspective, paste it in there. So now we have the variable set, and we can add that to our email down below. We don't need to do anything for a no statement because we don't care if it's a no, we want it to move on. But this is where we need to handle, what do we do if it's a multiple condition, right? If it's more than one item. So this is the fun part. Right here, we're going to add another condition. And we're going to rename it. Can't type if people are watching. So what do we do here? How do we determine if multiple items have been selected, right? So if the output isn't equal to, but if it contains a comma, right? So in the email, if there's more than one item, it's going to have a comma. If it's just one item, it's not going to have a comma. That's the easiest logic I've found to make that happen. So now we can come back to condition new perspective. We can copy to my clipboard the get file content. We can copy to my clipboard the set variable, and we can come over to innovative, and we can paste in, add an action. From my clipboard, you have to do the get file content first. It'll collapse your flow. Don't worry, you can get back into it. And now we're going to add another action back to the clipboard, the set the variable. Now, if we expand these, they're incorrect. We're going to need to fix them, but they're there, and it makes things a little bit easier for us. So I'm going to copy the text here, change new perspective, now you'll notice if I hover over this text, it's still referencing the other one. So we know that's not going to work. So I'm going to delete that. And we're going to change this location from new perspective to innovative. Now here, I'm going to put my mouse right at the end of the comma, come to expression. I'm going to copy and paste in the dollar content because I don't trust myself to type things correctly when people are watching. Move to the front, go back to dynamic content. And now you'll see the only option I have is get file content 2, which is the one right above it. Had I left the old code in there, it would have referenced the other side of the flow, the other condition, and would have failed everywhere in an ugly fashion. So now I hit OK, and now we have what we need. Now we can go back to the condition multiple props selected and do the same thing. We're going to go to my clipboard. We're going to get file content. You have to get the file content first. Now here, I will rename this one just because it's bugging me. And we're going to select the file. Now we're going to add an action. Again, from my clipboard, set the variable. Go in, get rid of this, change this to props, put the cursor right where we need, which is right there. Go to expression, Move the mouse to the beginning, go to dynamic content, scroll down, get content of multiple options. Hit OK, and there we have it. Now if I hit save, if I've done everything correctly, it shouldn't yell at me. Flow is ready to go. We recommend you test. Now how do we test it, right? From the email that we were provided by marketing, we know they want the graphic at the top. Well, you're going to have to brush up on your HTML skills just a little bit because we want that graphic to be centered in the email. So we're going to go to HTML and get rid of the code that's in there. And I'm just going to paste in a paragraph style. And then I'm going to close the paragraph. But in between here, I'm going to put in the props file location that we entered. Hit save one more time. Now let's test. Go to test. We're going to automatically with a recent trigger, and this will show us the 5 options. But then I'm going to go and do a test and submit a new one. This is why you want yourself set as the email of all emails. I'm going to send one more with just one item. Here we go. I went back to the flow and I added the manager variable in the footer so we could just look at that as well. Here you can see I received the acknowledgement email for both tests. Here we have the first email. This is the props to you with multiple selections, the one that had all 5 selected. And here we have the footer. The copy of this recognition has been sent to the manager. Here we have the test that I sent to a user within my AD that did not have a manager. You'll see the proper image was selected and the manager notification didn't appear because he doesn't have a manager. We also got the email stating that the manager is missing. So let's go back and look at the run history for all of these. So here we have the flow and we can expand out all of the conditions. We see that these both were false, but they have green checks because they didn't fail, they were just false. Here we have a green check and this one is true. So in this case, we got the file content and we set the variable properly. Now if we scroll down here, we were able to get the manager, and because the manager succeeded, this portion of the flow worked. If we go back to the main screen and look at the other one for the user that didn't have a manager, and we scroll down to the apply to each loop, we'll see here that this failed, right? The manager wasn't successful. So the condition, if a manager is blank, still ran because we set it to run. I went back into Power Automate and fleshed out the HTML. Let's look at it together. The marketing department had given us a format, and for Outlook and for mobile devices, a 600 pixel centered table is generally the best, safest version. Now, so in our table style, we're setting a margin left of auto, margin right of auto. That should give us the center that we want. And then we're setting the border style to solid and the border color to a variable that I set as well. I named it background color, but it's really variable, or really border. So here we have the variable set like we did before, and I've added it to each condition. Background color, which is really the border, and the hex for that, back down to the bottom. Now that we've set the table, we want to then within that table have the different rows for the different sections of the email. So here we have a header with the congrats message. We have a second row with you got props. We have a third row with you are being recognized for with some bolding text, and then the output that we pinned together. So this is for 1 and this is for 5. We're just putting the text in there. Then as we move down, we're saying who it's from. We're giving them a thank you message. We're giving that main graphic, the center circle graphic again. And then at the bottom is something that's kind of fun. You want to recognize a colleague? We have the direct link back to the Power App to enable them to submit one of their friends for one as well. Getting a call to action, getting them to do something. And then we have the variable for the manager, either telling them that a copy has been sent to their manager or letting them know that this may be featured without the manager statement. Again, Manager missing has been sent to IT. I think we've covered all the bases. Please make sure to subscribe below. If you have any questions, comment. I will reply to every comment. I will also put the code in the comments. Have a wonderful day. If you found this tutorial helpful, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Let us know your thoughts, questions, and any topics you'd like us to cover in future videos. Sharing is caring, so don't forget to share this tutorial with your fellow Power Apps enthusiasts. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep rocking Power Apps like a true pro. See you in the next video.